Hey fam, Danny here. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. I've been a long time no see. I have not. I have some health issues. One of my health issues is a disease called neuropathy. It affects your nerves, and there's spectrums to it. And by that I mean, there's some people who are affected a little bit, some people a lot. I do go to physical therapy and occupational therapy, and it's been a long journey. And one day I'll make a video. We'll talk more about that. But I just been having a lot of issues lately. But jumping into things, I want to jump into Longlegs because, and this is going to be kind of a, I want to say not too many spoilers because I really think if you haven't seen the movie, you should go see it. When I went to see it, I did a double feature. I did Longlegs and Maxine, and it was crazy doing those two together. It was supposed to be me seeing Maxine first and then Longlegs, but I couldn't do that because the show that I wanted to see was sold out, so I had to switch it around, if that makes any sense. So I wound up seeing Longlegs first and then Maxine, and so it was just really surreal going from one to the other. And I had a very small gap. It was pretty much like, okay, go to the little girl's room, refill my drink and popcorn, and then just go sit back down. And basically, the movie started, and they were right next door to each other. So it was kind of cool, to do it like that. And I will be getting into Maxine as well. We will be doing a show on that. It will be basically focusing on it as a trilogy. We'll be talking about it, and we'll be comparing it to other trilogies. So it's going to be a big show that's coming down the pike. But for right now, let's get into Longlegs. Now, let's start off by talking about some facts, right? If you see me looking over, I'm looking at my notes because there's a lot that I wanted to say and a lot of thoughts that I had. But the movie was directed by Osgood Perkins. Now, who is Osgood Perkins? This guy has a legit resume. First off, his mom is Marissa Berenson, who was a very beautiful fashion photographer and actress. And his father was Anthony Perkins, who is a great actor. He was in Desire Under the Elms, a great Eugene O'Neill play. He was also in Mahogany, which was very good. He's been in a lot of movies, but he's most famous for a little Hitchcock film that you might have heard of called Psycho, where he played Norman Bates. So this guy's pedigree is legit. This film also stars Nicolas Cage, who also has the Coppola pedigree, and he's been in quite a few horror movies as well. So they're coming at this entrenched with a lot of cinephile like history. They're both cinephiles, and Osgood Perkins has done a lot of press where he's talked about a lot of conversations they've had and how cool it was to talk to Nicolas Cage, who was so knowledgeable about so many things about movies and stuff. And in addition to directing Longlegs, he's also done Gretel and Hansel, The Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. He's been in Secretary. He's starred in Nope. So he's been in a few movies as well. So this movie had a lot of twists and a lot of turns to it. Oh, I also want to mention that he also played a younger version of his dad in Psycho 2, which is a very overlooked sequel. It was really good, and when we talk about trilogies, we would definitely be talking about Psycho. Well, actually, technically, there were 4 of them. For me, the first 2, by the 3rd and 4th, we kind of, got into some different territory, but we'll talk about that. But that was something that I also wanted to mention. We also have Alicia Witt in this film, Blair Underwood, Michael Monroe, who is awesome in this movie from It Follows. She's awesome in this movie. And so it is being billed. A lot of people have talked about Silence of the Lambs. And Oscar Perkins has said, he wanted to kind of, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, lull the audience into a false sense of security by thinking you're seeing like kind of like Silence of the Lambs, 2.0, like a new version of it. But that's not what he's giving you. I mean, it's almost like Hitchcockian how he kind of flips it, and you think that's what you're seeing, and there's a lot of similarities because there is a serial killer involved. There's a young agent who's green, just like Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs, aka Jodie Foster, who's green, and we've got, Blair Underwood would, I guess, if you were doing a quote unquote, book in comparison, would be the Jack Crawford character, but he's not like Jack Crawford. I mean, Jack Crawford was a little bit kind of rough around the edges, where Blair Underwood's character is a little bit softer. He had, we get to see his family, whom he loves, and he balances. You can tell this is a person who balances family and balances work pretty well, and because he works at it, to not overuse the word work, but he works at it. Also, I want to talk about, so we have Micah Monroe, who plays Lee Harker. She's an FBI agent and symbiologist. She's an agent assigned to the case, and this case is new for her. Like I said, she's kind of jumping in, but Blair Underwood, her boss, is not babying her. So even though he's a little sensitive to her, but not too sensitive, he's kind of like, she's got it. She can handle it when it's questioned. And his character he plays is Agent Carter. He's a senior agent here. Alicia Witt plays Ruth Harker, Lee's mom, which is Michael Monroe's character. And she is very reminiscent of Carrie White. If you saw Carrie, I'm sorry, not Carrie White, Carrie White's mom in Carrie. She kind of reminds you of that woman. Very, very, there's just something off. Kiernan Shipka also turns in from Sabrina and so many other things. She turns in a great performance as one of Longlegs' only survivors. And she's almost unrecognizable in this film. But she really brings to life the adage that there's no small actors, only small roles, because she is unforgettable. She doesn't have a lot of screen time. In fact, Oscar Perkins said he called her up and was like, "Do you want to come in and do some work for me for a day?" But you don't forget her. And it's funny because I'm looking at her and I'm like, is that Kiernan Shipka? I mean, it looks like her, but is it? And it was. And it was. With Nicolas Cage, oh my gosh. So he plays Longlegs, whose name is Ferdinand Cobbler. He is a serial killer, devil worshiper. He has basically been involved in the murder of quite a few families over 3 different decades. He leaves these cryptic messages, these ciphers, and his performance is, oh my gosh, just so electric. He also produces film under the banner of his Saturn Productions. So he had a lot of skin in the game. And when we see him, like, it's almost like a Jaws thing, because the first scene, we see him, but we don't. We hear his voice and we see part of his body, but we don't see him. And by the time we see him, it's so jarring. And another interesting fact is Oscar Perkins said actually he purposely set it up to where Michael Monroe and Nicolas Cage did not meet until there's a certain pivotal scene that's unforgettable, and they didn't meet. So when you watching that scene and knowing that these two people, this is the first time they ever encountered each other, is crazy. This movie was made for $10 million. And so far, last I checked, it had made about $56 million. And like I said, when I went to go see it, I looked at a lot of the showings and they were packed. The show I went to see was packed. And as I said before, I had to actually alter my plans because I wouldn't have been able, I would have had to get the seats like right up, like in front of the screen, and I can't do that. That's too close to me. So I just waited. But like I said, if you think you're looking at a Silence of the Lambs, you're going to be kind of thrown off there, because it's not that at all. There were a lot of things that Osgood Perkins put into this, as far as Nicolas Cage's appearance, which a lot of people are talking about. He was inspired by the show Botched, which I got that entirely, because when you do see his face, it actually does look like plastic surgery that has gone wrong, and that's what they were going for. Also, Bob Dylan, under his I think it was the Rolling Thunder review. I'm not a huge Bob Dylan fan, but if I remember correctly, that was the name of that tour, and that's what they were inspired by, because he wore this white makeup. I'm not a big Dylan fan. I liked his when he went into his kind of Christian phase, not necessarily just because it was that, but because I liked the music that came out of that. But I'm not, kind of maybe his early work, like I said, he's a hit or miss for me. But anyway, this movie exemplifies to me magical realism, which is when they take supernatural elements and magical elements, and they put them in a realistic setting, which is basically what this film does. Like I said, we have something very real. These families are being murdered. There is a serial killer out there, but we find out as the story unfolds that there is a supernatural element to that story, and we're thrown, like, after, I would say, the first act, we start to see that just maybe this isn't what we thought it was. And that's what I think is so jarring about this film. And I think that may be why some people didn't like it, because I actually had to wait. I got to the theater early, and as people were coming out, I asked a few people, I said, what did you think? Because the first people that came out, the first couple, there was a couple, and the young lady was like, that was the worst movie I ever saw. And the guy was like, yeah, I know. And then another girl came out and was like, that was really weird. And then I heard, oh my gosh, that movie sucked. So I said, well, let me ask. And the next, was a couple, and they loved it. And I'm the type of person, I like to make my own judgment. I was very intrigued by it. I liked Osgood Perkins' work prior to this, and I love Nicolas Cage. I even thought, I wasn't a fan of the remake of The Wicker Man. I would suggest to anyone, if you do watch it, you watch the original, but Nicolas Cage is always Nicolas Cage. So even in a bad movie, he's good. And he's had a few forays into horror besides The Wicker Man. Mandy, he's done Mandy. So he's done quite a few things. So this movie is also big on relationships, family relationships. We have the relationship with Lee and her mom, which we can see she loves her mom, but there's a distance. And she doesn't know much about her childhood. And we find out later there's a reason for that. But it's just, you can tell how it has affected her relationships now, because she's very reserved and very closed off. Like, she lives alone. You don't see any indication of any friends. There's no, indication of any kind of love interest in here. And there's a scene where Agent Carter, Blair Underwood, invites her to his home to meet his family, his daughter, and she's sitting in the room, and there's this awkwardness. Like, you could tell that, it's not just awkwardness about being alone with a child, a person who's not used to kids. It's like she's not used to being alone with a human being on a personal level. She seems very comfortable when she's at work, but on a personal level, not so much. So it's almost like that disconnect developed from her childhood. So in contrast, we see Blair Underwood and his family, and even though we don't see them a lot, we see them enough, and they're nice big. They play heavily toward the end of this film. And we see this very loving relationship. And what another interesting thing I found about this was a lot of Longlegs' behavior was based on Nicolas Cage's mom. His mom was plagued with mental illness, and so a lot of the mannerisms and things that she did, he incorporated into this character. And he said that it was kind of like a catharsis, like an exorcism, like dealing with his feelings. I found that to be very, very interesting. And Oscar Perkins talked about his dad, because his dad, was a complicated person as well. I mean, he was going around at a time where he couldn't really be who he was, because, back then, especially for an actor and being a leading man, you could not be a leading man and be, gay. It just wasn't a thing. So he talked about that. So family was a big part in the back of their minds as they were making this crazy, bizarre film that just takes us on this journey, this ride that just seems normal. Like, I've really felt like it was like you're on this roller coaster and you're riding it, and you're okay. So there's this young agent. Okay, she's green. For some reason, they picked her because they think that, she's qualified. She can do it. And we find out she's personally involved. Somehow Longlegs sends her a cipher, and she does not tell her superiors that she got this cipher, and they're trying to figure out, like, she's figuring out things and feeling things. You find out there's a little clairvoyance early on in the story that, she can kind of sense things before they happen. So we kind of get a hint of that, but then you don't know in the beginning, because it could be, well, maybe she just has really good instincts, good gut instincts. So we're going along with the story as they're trying to figure this out. And it just, like I said, it just really takes you for a complete loop. We find out that Longlegs, like I said, there's a devil worship aspect to this. He's a devil worshiper. We find out that he has had a relationship, so to speak, with her mom. And there's just like a lot that we find out later on. Like I said, I really don't want to give too much away, because I really think this is a film that I if you like suspense, if you like horror, if you like, it kind of reminded me of Black Phone a little bit. Like, not quite like it's like Black Phone, because that's one thing he did mention, that he didn't want to go exactly that route and make it exactly like that. But I would say if you liked Black Phone, you'll like this film. If that's your type of thing, for me, it's really up my alley. So I would love to know, like, what your guys's opinion is on Longlegs. We're probably going to be talking more about this, because I'm thinking about doing a compare and contrast to Silence of the Lambs, since there's been so much talk about them being alike, or even doing a Black Phone Longlegs comparison. But I really want to give more people an opportunity to see the film, because I really think it's worth seeing. And that's why, like I said, I didn't want to give too many spoilers. But I will say that if don't go in thinking that this is just going to be the average run-of-the-mill serial killer movie, because it's not. It's not going to be that at all. It's totally different, and you will really be thrown for a loop. So, talk to you guys soon, and as always, stay different. Bye.